to our Friday lecture series, which of course is made possible by the Webster University Speakers Committee, who helped us helped us fund our lecture series. It's super exciting for me today to introduce sudduth, who was a graduate of the Department of Art, Design, and Art History 2010 in sculpture. Yes. And it's been wonderful following their career over the last several years. So like I said, simiya got their degree here in 2010, then went to study landscape architecture at Washington University. And you're still currently working on your MFA.
MFA, I'm graduating in art.
Yes. Woo-hoo! At Northwest College of Art, Willamette University in Portland, Oregon. Simiya currently teaches art to kindergarten through 6th grades at the New City School here in the city. They have created numerous outdoor murals and exhibited their work in many national exhibitions. And it's my great pleasure to welcome simiya.
So I'm just really excited to be here. It feels different but the same at the same time. I'm going to plan for maybe around like 40-ish minutes and then leave some room for questions. But if there are questions or things in the, like while I'm talking, please raise your hand and we can kind of keep it more like open because you might forget towards the end. So as I introduce myself, I want to acknowledge first like the land that we're on and honor the people who stewarded this land to bring us to this point, and I also have to honor my ancestors who guided me through everything in life. I'm nothing without them. And as a Black and Indigenous person, my ancestry and my familial experience is very much tied to what I make and why I do what I do. So I always have to start with honoring my ancestors and honoring the land that I'm on. So just to introduce myself, I'm a multidisciplinary, but I'm kind of leaning more like towards this term transdisciplinary or non-disciplinary artist who works in the realms of illustration, public art, performance, and social practice. My practice is directly influenced by my identity as a Black and Indigenous mixed-race person. I identify as two-spirit. I'm a mom, I'm a single parent, a femme, and a spiritual practitioner. And my lived experience directly contributes to what I'm interested in and why I create work that explores labor, healing, care, rest, spirituality, and challenging systems of oppression. And so what do I do and why? My practice really expands into so many different directions and spans a lot of categories. But three things that really are through lines through my work are the energetics and spirituality. So there's a lot of spiritual influence in my work. It may be direct or it may be more of an undercurrent. A part of my practice is challenging systems of oppression. So that might be through that more healing-based work, offering healing work that is inclusive and more accessible to folks through the content of the work that I make, or just by being a queer Black artist, especially making art in the public realm, which is, when you get into muralists, it's highly male, highly white, and then it just gets, very small in terms of visibility of people of color and women who are public artists. And then, like I mentioned before, my ancestors and my culture are major influences in my work as an artist. And I view my role as an artist as a storyteller, a translator, and a messenger and creator of culture. I look at the role that art plays in Indigenous and African culture, and I feel like it's just an ancestral calling. And I'm honored to be an artist, and I was just made for this wacky lifestyle. And so influences, my practice is really heavily research-based, and you'll see this in so many different ways. Sometimes it's very explicit. A lot of times it's very much like a spiritual or energetic influence. So I'm really a huge fan of hip-hop. That comes through in my sound work, but it also comes through in the way that I work. I am a yoga teacher, a meditation teacher, a Reiki practitioner, and so all of that studying and influence is also into my work. So all of these artists, musicians, astrologers, they find their way into my work. I learn from these folks, and I am forever indebted other artists and creatives. And like I said, heavily research-based practice. I think right now the work that I'm doing is really influenced by Tricia Hersey and her Nat Ministry and Rest is Resistance, Adrienne Marie Brown, pleasure activism, emergent strategy. I think those are like the top influences of the work that I'm doing right now and that I've been doing over the past few years. And definitely Sun Ra can come through my sound work, as well as the way my brain works. I'm a Gemini, Sun Ra is a Gemini. I feel like it's the Gemini brain being a little bit out there. And so I just want to go all the way back to my BFA work. These pictures are really bad. 2009. But I think my interests have definitely changed over time, but I can see these little sprouts of things like still being carried forward into my practice now. So I was really interested in like agriculture and plants and food sovereignty, and I was making these like mobile bike carts, and this was like a first experimental thing that I did to kind of like test this idea. And I biked to school every day. I don't bike as much as I used to now that I have 2 children and my body has changed quite a bit and I'm getting a little old. But I used to bike everywhere, and so this was my bike, and I was like making these carts with kind of like mobile gardens. That I was just so super interested in this idea, and this idea of like mobile healing and health and wellness is still in my practice now, so you'll see that in a different way later. And so that baby cart turned into this, I don't remember how long it was like a pretty long like mobile garden idea. Obviously it's very impractical, extremely heavy, you know, but it's the idea of like popping up or healing and having charge of your healing, and being in an urban space and having a lack of access to like fresh things. All that kind of stuff was in my mind at that time, and that's still a concern now, and I think even more so.
Looked great in the gallery.
Yeah, I loved it. I loved it. And like these pictures were from 2009, so they weren't super good. But some of these things, like there was new material, there was plant material, there was also like bike things that I was scoundreling around to get. This was one of students, her son's name is Imran. He was helping me kind of like take it down and put it back together. So this was just like some install shots. I think maybe it was 10 to 12 feet. And so my work has changed quite a bit, but I think what I see here is an interest in scale, an interest in food and agriculture and place. That translates into my work now as a muralist and even as a social practice-based artist. So I really love like taking out space, having experimenting with space, and also work that engages the public. A big, I think, guiding factor of my work and my practice as an artist is accessibility. And I don't really show much work in galleries. It's often in the public or as performances or pop-ups, because there's a level of accessibility and engagement that can happen that is quite a bit different than working in a gallery. I'm not opposed to that. That's just how my practice has changed over time. And so between 2009 and 2020, as soon as I graduated, I got pregnant with my first child. Then I had another child. So my practice has really ebbed and flowed while I've been a mother to 2 children who are now teenagers and tweens. And so in between that time in 2020, you know, my practice was like here and there, stopping and starting, you know, still making art, still teaching art. But in 2020, a lot of people have a lot of big shifts. I had more time, and I also just kind of like re-engaged with my practice. And I had this opportunity to have a billboard. This was near the airport. The Luminary was doing something with STL Maine to try to like uplift folks during the pandemic, and there was this billboard series. And this was like, I think, when my practice just kind of like went from hibernation to like an explosion of growth. So this was like my really big like first public art opportunity. I was really honored to have this opportunity. This was temporary, as billboards are, so it was just a few months. And this piece is part of my Confluence Tarot work, which is upstairs in the gallery here, and then I'm going to talk more about this work later. So to me, this was like my first taste of like something's really changing in my practice. And then in 2020, I applied for this opportunity to paint a mural at Lambert Airport, and this was my very first mural, a 2,000 square foot mural. I'd never done this before, but I knew I could, and I did, and it was great. It was really great. It was a great learning experience, but it was also like it was tough. But I applied my knowledge of scale and taking up space and applying ideas to space to start this mural practice, to start this large scale practice. So I work in the realm of illustration. A lot of times when I'm doing these murals, every time, I'm drawing everything to scale digitally. And that just kind of helps me in terms of like my brain, the way I think, and it's easier for me to apply it when I'm doing these things in public. So this was my first project. This is a public space. This is the airport. It had to be something that appealed to folks, but I also wanted it to be place-based. And so I chose two native plants. Echinacea is a healing plant, and it has great significance of like actual physical healing. But it's also honoring the prairie landscape that we are in. And you would think like this heart hand, and then on this wall there was supposed to be a peace sign hand with a similar skin tone color that would welcome you to St. Louis with peace and love and like this place-based kind of peaceful thing. But the peace sign didn't make it because it was considered too controversial.
Oh, wow.
And it was, so this was also like censorship in a way that I did not understand. It didn't really make much sense to me at all. But you know, this is an airport, it's a public entity. But I think, you know, there's very subtle things happening here, but to have like two huge, maybe like 10 and a half, 12-foot black hands welcoming you into a space and like overpowering you, I think that peace sign hand that was supposed to emerge from this, you know, that, I think that had something to do with it. But I'm able to repurpose what was supposed to go here, and you'll see that in another mural. So this is still at Lambert Airport, Terminal 2. You know, it's fun, but it's also like thinking it's a really chaotic space. It's very stressful, and I wanted to kind of like break up that stress and give folks like something to like meditate on and to think about. And so, you know, there's a lot of space in the background between these flowers, so you're not completely overwhelmed with imagery. And I think here, like that concept of healing is very subtle, but also not at the same time. And so, with my public practice, with the mural work, it's often coming from a place of like joy and spreading joy and healing, and thinking about how art affects like public consciousness. And also, people are going to come in contact with this work, and it's not necessarily consensual. So I want to create something that goes in the public that can help people like feel good and feel joyful. So you'll see different themes within my mural work. But this piece is over in Belleville. I painted this as soon as I finished the airport piece. And so, you know, this is very simple. It's very cute. It's rainbow, but then there's two hands where there's pink fingernails, and they're both two different skin colors. And so somebody was interviewing me about, like, this is about gay women. And I'm like, yeah, sure. Great. Like, but it's also just like, you know, about harmony. The rainbow is this is the color of the chakra system. There's so many different ways to interpret this work, and yes, it can be interpreted as queer artwork, and that's great to me. But it's also just something that brings a lot of people joy, and I think that can also be very radical and very healing when there's just so much that is like antithetical to joy that's happening in the world right now. And so this is about 24 feet by 24 feet, and yes, like I designed all of this and I do paint it, and I have some imagery of me like working on things in the next few slides. So with this work, a part of my practice, like I love going to residencies, and those are also very healing for me as an artist, and it's like an incubation time. I was invited to this place called Allerton Park and Retreat Center in Illinois. It's about 2.5 hours away from here. And I got to live in this like wooded area, this forested area for 2 weeks with my kids. And I got to make art, and this was a part of my exchange that I wanted to leave a mural behind. And there's like a forested place, a lot of birds really come to this space. And so I looked at what sorts of birds come to this space and are fed and nurtured by this retreat center, and I decided to focus on the birds that come here for this mural piece. So this is in a cafe there, and again, it's joyful, it's bright. I also very much believe in like the healing power of color and art, and so this might not seem like there's an express healing message with this work, but I'm very particular with the colors that I choose. Color psychology is very powerful, and so I want something that will, you know, either evoke peace or calm or like a joyful, uplifting energy without feeling chaotic. And there's even, this is not drunk tank pink, but there's this color that they have called drunk tank pink that was supposed to make people feel calm in like the jail system. But after a while, they learned that that shade of pink was actually making people like feel like really mentally unwell.
Yeah.
So color is really powerful. That's another area of research for me. So there's just a lot of like subtleties that go into this stuff.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Do any colors in nature, like a flower, do they cause like negative or, you know, stress?
I don't believe so. I think a lot of things like humans do believe like that cause stress, but if colors let you know like danger, especially like with frogs or certain things like poison, danger, this is safe. I think plants attract pollinators to them based on their color and their shape. So, you know, yes, there's warning signs, but I think some of the things that we do as human beings, like, we don't necessarily know the right thing to do. But I guess my area of research with that is very much on like the healing end, and so that's where I spend most of my time researching. And then just like a few of these images, I'm also pairing some like stop motion, not stop motion, what is this called? Time lapse, thank you. Just to show you like the process of me working, and you know, it's fun. It's fun to do this. It's also fun to see because oftentimes there's nothing there and then there's something. Because this took me 3 days. This took about 30 days, but it was because it was so hot, and I could only work from like 5 a.m. to about 12 or 1, because the paint will curdle, the wall is extremely hot, and then just physically it's hard labor, and I will be exhausted. So projects like this take me anywhere from like 3 days to a month, really depending on weather or problems with the lift or something like that. So this is a piece that was the sister of the piece at Lambert, so that was supposed to go on that wall I mentioned before, and it didn't, but this is at the Kranzberg Art Foundation at Sophie's Artist Lounge in that mural walk. And it's, you know, it's a joyful piece, but it's also like steeped in this idea of healing and honoring people whose labor has like tended this land and tending spaces for all of humanity. So yeah, I really like this piece. It's fun, it's joyful, and to think that it was censored is very strange. You know, like something like this was deemed inappropriate for the airport.
Was it the people that own the director of the airport, or is it?
Yes, there's a woman who's the director of the airport. That was her thought, but I think she was doing that based on like what she thought the feedback would be. And she said it was too strongly tied to Vietnam and the Vietnam War, which we are very far away from now, but I think that was also her age and her generation.
I thought when you were talking about pink symbol, I thought it was going to be a little round circle one. I didn't even know it was hands.
No, it's the hands. It's the hands.
Did it look like that?
And so with this, like I'm getting up in the lift and painting these things. Often I have one assistant that I work with. He's also my mentor, or I work by myself. At the airport, I had assistants. I had to hire people. That was like a part of my process as an artist. So that's where like professional development comes in. And you know, there's a lot of things that go into like doing work like this, like proposals, meeting with people, renting equipment, having insurance on your practice. And if there's questions about that later, you know, that's always something to think about as you consider like what your practice is going to be as an artist. And so a lot of times with this mural work, like it's me painting something because I've been commissioned or I've applied or I've been invited. But there's also another component where I'm working directly with like organizations and folks as like a mentor or career training. And so this is something I did in the fall of 2024 with St. Louis Story Stitchers Collective and Urban Harvest Farms. And so they reached out to me because of like my focus on like healing and being a Black and Indigenous person, because a lot of the young people that come to Story Stitchers identify as Black and Indigenous. And this farm is in Grandel, like kind of like Grand Center area. And so they want this to be inviting to people of color, and they want people to feel comfortable engaging in urban farming work, but there is such, there's a lot of trauma with Black and Indigenous people and land, and particularly farming and crops and sharecropping and not having space to grow things. And you can just keep going with that. And so we wanted to create something that felt healing, that felt empowering, that also focused on like a Black and Indigenous presence at this farm and the space in general. So these are like some young adults, teens, that we worked on like a collaborative design process, and they also helped to paint it. So I was there as kind of like the OG, like the mentor, but it was very much like, I'm gonna show you all like how I do these things, how are we gonna apply this design to this surface, how do you work with this dented up, wobbly surface. And so some of these folks identify as artists, musicians. Story Stitchers is a really great place. So a lot of them are like hip hop artists, producers, beat makers, but they're also visual artists. And it was just a great experience to work with these young folks. And you know, we were working around people's work schedules and my schedule and like real life stuff. So I enjoy things like this because this is giving like a practical skill while also creating art and things for some other people to enjoy. And so now these folks have an idea of like, if I wanted to apply this in my practice, if I wanted to apply for a mural, I have hands-on experience doing this. So that community engagement part is also a huge part of my practice as an artist. Like I'm not always just like popping up, painting something and like leaving. This was like months-long relationship that we had to develop and then get to this point. And I felt like finally towards the end, we were like getting really comfortable with each other. We were liking each other. You know, some people were showing up more than others. And so, you know, there's like the good, bad, and the ugly of community engagement as well. A lot of good, bad, and ugly, a lot of ugly. But this is, you know, this was a great project. And they, you know, this seemed like it was gonna be really simple, but that surface was terrible. And there's just a lot of technical skill that goes into this sort of thing. It can be super easy, but it can also just be tough. And so community engagement, this is kind of where we can go back to that idea of like mobile healing and pop-ups that I think I was really interested in that BFA work to this ongoing project called The Mothership. And I have this trailer, it's a 1970s travel trailer, and I had this idea that I wanted to have this mobile community wellness thing. I drew this. It does not look like one of these like dentist buses at all. But like, you know, you see those pop-up buses and I'm like, okay, this is really great, but we can do this for meditation and yoga and sound healing that feels accessible. And that's what I do with this piece. So this is like the drawing for the idea of how it would look on the inside. I wanted it to be very minimal, like a yoga studio, a really like sensory deprivation type space. And I bought this trailer at the end of 2019, and this is how it looked when I first got it. And the audio is just me yapping. But, you know, I bought this at the end of 2020, and then 2019, then 2020 happened, and I'm like, nobody wants to be in a tiny enclosed space with anybody else. So this project has really been like a baby of mine since the end of 2019. And so a friend helped me gut some of it out, and then there was asbestos, so we had to have asbestos remediation, which cost thousands of dollars. So even with public projects, like part of this was self-funded. I bought the trailer for $1,000, then I had to rip it out, you know, do that sort of labor, and the asbestos remediation came with Counterpublic. So I was commissioned in 2023, it started in 2022 to be a part of Counterpublic 2023, and they wanted my trailer to be like an activation as part of it. And so I was at this place where I'm like, there's asbestos in the trailer. I had a huge budget because of the exhibition, and thankfully the thousands of dollars that went into bringing it to the point that it is now was because of this exhibition. So this is probably like a $5,000 to $7,000 project that has taken years, and I think that this long-term kind of like ebb and flow characteristic is a huge part of my practice. I really like projects that I can kind of like revisit, I can change, that can adapt with me and my ideas over time. And so I most recently, this photo on the left, most recently brought this to a park in Dutchtown where I offered free Reiki, which is energy healing, to participants at this Dutchtown park. It was set up at Run for Women during Counter Public for about 3 months. And there was supposed to be like pop-in sessions where you could just go in and meditate and have like a space and time away from the world. I usually have plants hanging up all along the walls. I brought this to Slam. And it's just a really great space. And I can still see work that I could continue to do with this space, like putting electricity in it and doing a lot more with this piece. But this got covered in the New York Times. And I feel like this was like a really special moment for me in my practice as well. And I had to have a lot of longevity. So it started in 2019, and I'm still working with this project today. And so just leading from that piece with Counter Public and that billboard from 2020, this piece was also a part of a commission for Counter Public. And this is on Jefferson. On South Jefferson, there is a car wash on the other side of this. And so this is a permanent piece that I painted on the side of this building. And a huge part of Counter Public was supposed to be me unveiling a mural every month of the exhibition. But like I mentioned, the good and bad and ugly of public art, it was hard finding a space. It was hard finding permissions. I had to go to like some cultural preservation meeting because in Fox Park, you're not supposed to have any painting on buildings that aren't already painted. So there was just a ton of red tape to go through, and I ended up with this one permanent mural in my mothership piece. So I'm thankful for that because I still work with that mothership project, but this is also a permanent fixture on Jefferson, and the family was really willing to have this on their building, and they wanted this on their property. So I think that also speaks to kind of like how things go as an artist when you go into the public realm. You can have an idea, just like with Lambert, and it can get shot down. You have to adapt, and 3 murals turned into 1. But I'm happy that the 1 was there. And this is just a close-up of this. This is about like 10 feet by 14 feet, similar to the one that is at the Kransberg with the peace sign and the echinacea, around 11 by 14. So it's all pretty large scale. And this work is a part of my Confluence Tarot series, which I'm also going to talk about in a little bit. And so I painted this one last year, around this time last year. This is actually on a tarot shop in the Midtown area that's owned by a Black and Indigenous woman. And this was like a call to Midtown, like we want to do some murals, we want to beautify the space. And this was not a building that they were planning on painting anything on. I just submitted this. I was like, I want to paint this somewhere. We can find a building. I'm open to it, and then it just worked out. So I thought it was really, a great kind of like way for things to work out on that building. A little bit of a close-up. So 11 by 14, that's similar size, and then this piece is also a print upstairs in the gallery. There. And so I'll talk more about this work. This is an ongoing project, the Confluence Tarot. I've been working on this for like 6 years now. And right now I'm working on the guidebook, and I'm hoping to get the actual deck published like towards the end of this year. But with this work, you can see my interest in agriculture and plants and food systems and like local ecology showing up in these illustrations. And so this is my take on the Rider-Waite Smith tarot deck, but it's a decolonized Mississippi River Valley interpretation of that work. And so all of the images, the people, the places that you see, these are all real people, real places. So So I do a lot of archival research, so that's where that research-based part comes into play. And these are all spaces or people that should be in the Mississippi River Valley. I can't tell you exactly where this young lady came from, but we certainly had slavery here in St. Louis and in the Mississippi River Valley. So it's definitely something that is within this place or within this history. And so again, research. I love research. I love collecting tarot cards. This is a part of my research. Sure, playing with tarot cards doesn't seem like research, but it really is. And, you know, I look at how they feel, the size, the colors, the symbolism, the imagery, and especially this Rider-Waite-Smith deck, that most iconic deck, is like so integral to my practice. So with this work that I'm doing, I'm using the same naming conventions, the colors, the symbols, but it's definitely remixed. And Rider-Waite-Smith, how much I love tarot, this is extremely white, is extremely heterosexual. There's not a piece of brown skin in any of those cards. But Pamela Coleman Smith is the illustrator, and she was a Black woman. So there's also an issue with the tarot deck because it's usually called Rider-Waite, but then now there's this new movement to call it Rider-Waite-Smith, so we honor Pamela Coleman Smith's drawings. So, you know, despite the problematic nature of the drawings, they're absolutely beautiful. And what I love about each tarot card, it's like it's a world of its own, and I think it really lends itself well to the mural work, because the Justice card can stand on its own. The Queen of Wands can stand on its own. And so with my interpretations, I'm really looking at like the cultural systems, agriculture, plants, time, space, systems, alongside that tarot convention. So Three of Wands, this is like the corn is the wands of my deck. And this could be, you know, maybe this could be like strength in this particular image, or maybe there's like a critique of large scale agriculture. So some of this work is very like affirming, but some of it I'm also very critical in this work. And so justice, like the justice card, you're supposed to be weighing the scales of like right and wrong and what is going on like with a situation in tarot. And so this version is like a decolonized version of, I'm thinking about land back, I'm thinking about reparations, I'm thinking about agency. And in these cards, all the people of color, most of the people in my cards are staring directly at you, or I am thinking about them in a place of like power and agency, and I'm even very particular about like showing people engaging in labor. And I've redone some of these cards multiple times based on like the energy that is being portrayed in the cards. And so this card just is a little controversial, little guy, but it's actually like a positive card. So death, without death, we can't have anything new. And this symbolizes a rebirth. And so this is my calling to like a new take on agriculture, and this kind of stereotypical idea that this is what a farmer looks like, but globally that is not the case. Most farmers are people of color, and most farmers are women. And this monocrop of soy, you know, this like American like yuckness that is happening with agriculture, like it's not very healthy. It's not very healthy for the earth, and it's not healthy for a lot of things. And so this is really a card of changing things. But people think it's, you know, face value, sure, but that's kind of what ties you in. And then Queen of Wands, this is a card that represents your intuition and like decision-making skills. And so I wanted to show an Indigenous person with agency here, and Wands is about power, making decisions, and feeling comfortable and strong in your decision making. And so this is another kind of more critical card, because like we're living in, well now it's Bayer. This is like Bayer territory, and this is kind of like my interest all the way going back to that BFA work. It's like food sovereignty, having control over your food, and just the titles and the names of things that Monsanto/Bayer has come up with, like Roundup Ready. To me, I'm even like relating that to like rounding up buffalo, rounding up indigenous people, especially with the way that their products like attack land and they use them on a massive scale. and then a lot of their products are called Pioneer or Roundup, and they're like perpetuating this like colonization through their agricultural products. So this is the emperor of the Midwest. This is the emperor of the farming system and the landscape. And so for me, this card, this is a call to a critical change. You know, like who is in charge? Where is your agency? How can we evoke agency in so many different ways? And also the Knight of Swords. This person is applying a pesticide. And I think there's also like an invisible aspect to agriculture. You know, we've moved from black slavery in terms of like how crops are mostly tended to migrant workers who are underpaid, working in dangerous conditions, working extremely hot weather, dealing with difficult and dangerous pesticides and chemicals to get us our food. And so I'm also thinking about like how things have changed and what's going on right now. And this is a refinery in New Orleans, and you don't need to know this, but these are like sugarcane crops. And this card represents our addictions. So sugar is an addictive substance, but also the refinery. And then like how close these two like institutions or products are to each other in terms of like institutionally cohabitating with each other, as well as like we're often having refineries and things like this next to our food and yeah, where we live and things like that. So that's a thought for that one. And then there's some cards like, you know, it ebbs and flows between critical and also joyful and empowering. And this little section in the back should be like honoring the mounds. It's like a mound-like structure. And this card could be considered like, to me, this is more of like self-love and reflection and seeing love reflected in yourself and other people that look like you, but also it has like a very queer connotation as well. And again, there's this critical component of judgment card is, you know, you're being presented like with your choices and like where you're moving next into a major life cycle at the completion of a life cycle. And, you know, we're dealing with a lot of pollinator die-off, a lot of problems with our air quality. So this to me was like a really good image for the last judgment, or the card is called Judgment, but I changed it like just slightly by saying the last judgment here. Again, going between joy and being critical. There's wheat crops. And I also really think about the symbolism in each card, like the original card and what I want to portray. So there's, the fertility is really strong here. So this person is pregnant, we're in the wheat field, the water's in the back, we're looking at the fertile soil, and we're on a riverbank just honoring the Mississippi River Valley space. And just to close out with that work from Tricia Hersey, who I feel like is, again, really influencing my work right now. I'm the trickster, assigned as the debt collector by my ancestors, resting to reclaim the dream space stolen. Pay up. Well, it's time for questions.